We all know that hockey is an insanely expensive sport, and that's really because the gear is expensive. And we also know that beer leaguers generally don't have the biggest budget for replacing stuff as soon as the littlest thing on it breaks. So, in this episode of the Beer Leaguer podcast, I'm talking about different ways to extend the life of your gear with simple to not so simple repairs you can do on all your equipment so it will last a little bit longer until you can afford to replace it. Hey, everybody, Beer Leaguer here with another episode of the Beer Leaguer podcast. And on this episode, we're going to go back to one of the old favorite subjects of talking about hockey gear, but not going to be talking about any gear reviews or how to use your gear best or anything like that. Instead, we're going to talk about the very thrifty practice of how to fix your gear, how to even know if your gear has something wrong with it, how to know if it's time to replace the stuff that you have or if you can get a little bit more life out of it. So I'm just going to start from the bottom, skates, work all the way up, talk about common things that I see and I've heard of from people of things that have broken, things that have worn out, things that they've needed to fix. Give as many ideas of ways that I've seen that you can fix things, cheap ways, kind of expensive ways, probably a couple very expensive ways, and how they're, if it's worth doing it or not with some of the gear. So, kind of as a disclaimer for all these things, really any of the protective gear that you have, which is basically everything that you have for hockey, once you start repairing it, when it gets to the point that you need to be repairing it, it's going to significantly lessen how good it protects whatever it's supposed to protect. That goes probably triple for helmets. So, helmets really, as soon as anything goes on a helmet, you really shouldn't be trying to fix it because you really can't fix busted up helmets. You can do some stuff. We'll talk about that. But keep that in mind through all this. That as soon as you have any protective gear that has been compromised in some way and you're trying to repair it so that you don't have to go out and get new things right away, because let's face it, anything hockey is expensive. So if you can make stuff last a little bit longer, all the better. Then just know that as you're fixing, patching, repairing any of this stuff, you are compromising the integrity of its protection capabilities. So, with that out of the way, like I said, we're going to start at the bottom. If you're watching the video version of this, available at thebeerleaguer.com, then you will see me using props. I will not pretend to think that everybody is watching the video of this, so I will do my best to explain using my words what I am showing the camera. All right, so starting with skates, a couple things you kind of can't really repair. If your steel breaks on your skates, you can't repair that. You got to get new steel. Sorry. I've seen steel crack. I've seen steel split. There's not a way you're fixing that. I mean, you can weld it together, but you don't want to skate on that. So that's just don't do that. It's buy new steel. Now your runners, holders, whatever you want to call them, those guys, various things can happen there. If the holders themselves are broken, I have had broken holders. I took a shot off one a couple years ago and it just shattered part of the holder. You can't really fix that. You shouldn't fix that. You're putting all your weight on these things, and because they're your skates and the way you skate, you're probably putting all your weight on one of them at a time. So that is something you do not want to repair. You don't want to glue that back together. You don't want to epoxy that. I'm sorry, JB Weld is not going to fix that. It'll put it back together, but that's one of those things you shouldn't mess around with. Now, another thing that I have seen happen with your holders is the various trigger mechanisms that there are for holding the steel in there. Those can malfunction. And generally, the trigger holders are pretty easy to repair, unless they've had some catastrophic damage. You can buy repair kits from whoever makes your holders, Bauer, True, CCM, whoever you got. You can usually buy repair kits for them. And for the most part, they're just like a little trigger and like a little piece of plastic that kind of holds everything in, and a spring, and that's about it. It's usually not too hard to repair. You can find videos online how to repair them. They're usually pretty simple mechanisms. The older they are, the simpler they're going to be. Some of the newer ones are a little bit more complicated to do it. But for the most part, unless something is completely broken with it, if it's even just the spring breaks, or if like the little plastic trigger breaks or something like that, you can buy a repair kit and repair that, and uh, it'll hold in your blade just like new. So that's a very simple fix. There's not really a way around repairing that, because with the new types of blades that there are out there, anything newer, and I say newer is in like the last probably 10 years or so, has some kind of a trigger mechanism to hold it in place. So you do need to have that working to keep your blades in there. Older skates that have just kind of the screw to hold it in, you can get other screws that will fit, but they're probably not going to fit completely correctly to hold your blade in, and you can buy the correct screws. They're usually very short, and they have like a flat side on them and everything, so they don't stick out and protrude in weird ways for your skates and anything like that. So that is something that you'd probably just, instead of going and grabbing one from your workshop, order the correct screw for it. It's probably going to be expensive for what it is, but in reality, it's worth it to have the correct one for something like that, I think. Now, the other thing on your runners that can go bad is the rivets to hold them in. They can completely rust out. They can come out, come undone, all different things like that. And depending on what actually has happened with those, there's a couple things you can do. You can always replace these rivets. You can get someone at any good hockey pro shop will be able to do this. They'll have the machine for it. If you have a riveter that can get in there into the spots to do that, there's nothing magical about the hockey rivets that have those, especially these brass ones that are on there. They're just rivets. So if you have the right size rivets and you have a riveter that again can access this, you could do that. But the hockey skate riveters, they're made to fit in the hockey boot and do this. So they do it very quickly, do a very good job of it, and it's usually an extremely cheap service. So it's kind of worth just getting a pro to do it. And then you'll see on most skates, they usually only have 2 to 4 of these brass rivets that are on there. The rest of them are these kind of plastic rivets. And those brass rivets are there because they are a little bit more heavy duty than the other ones, and they're in kind of the more high stress area of your skates. So that's why you have those. So you could have those brass ones throughout for everything. And if you find that you're breaking rivets a whole lot in the same spot, let the person who's doing this know, and they'll probably put a brass one in there for it, just so it'll last for you. But there's not really a way around this. I've seen people put screws in there to hold it. And that's one of those, it kind of works. But honestly, if you're putting screws into something like that, eventually it's going to start wearing out the plastic that is the holder, and it's going to come undone. The whole point of the rivet is it's kind of holding from two sides, really just with pressure. It's not screwed in like that to have the threads, because there aren't threads in there. So you could use a very flat bolt and a nut, and cut the bottom of that bolt off so that it's not sticking way out from the bottom of your skate. That would be something similar to do. I suppose if you were in a real pinch, you could do that. But again, every place that I've seen that replaces rivets, it's extremely cheap. And I think it's way worth getting it done correctly and doing that the right way versus having something, that could unscrew itself. That's the whole thing with a like a nut and bolt is even if you put Loctite or something on there that is supposed to hold that in, it could eventually unscrew itself. So you'd have to be checking that pretty constantly to make sure that it's fine. So as a very quick repair for, hey, you have a game right now and you just notice that, I guess that would work. But anything more than that, you're really asking to have some problems with it. Now, if you have your holder, if it's coming out of your skate because it's starting to rip out the bottom of your skate, depending on how badly it's ripping that out, there is a couple things that can be done. They can, again, a good pro shop will do this, is they can kind of assess how bad it is on the bottom of your skate and maybe put in some extra material on the bottom of your skate to help hold in those rivets. but that can change how the inside of your skate feels a little bit, and that might be uncomfortable. It'll be under your footbed, but it raises up certain areas and can make it feel a little bit weird. But that is a way to make that last a little bit longer. But honestly, if you're starting to get rips and tears in the bottom of the boot like that, you're having problems, and they're not going to be easily fixed. You could try and epoxy and glue that stuff to kind of hold, but once that kind of stresses start to happen on the bottom of your boot, you need to be looking for some new skates. Nothing is permanently going to hold down there with any kind of good consistent hold at any point from there on. So not much you can really do that's going to be a permanent fix. There is, like I said, some kind of patch things you can do, but that's about it. All right, moving to the boot. What can you do if you have problems with your boots? Well, it depends what it is. If you have superficial problems with scrapes and cuts and nicks and stuff in your skate boots, if stuff's not going through and making the boot lose its integrity, I mean, hockey skates are generally pretty stiff. You can tell if it's losing its integrity pretty easily. Especially if they're newer skates, they should be, they're going to be a lot stiffer than older skates. Older skates tend to soften over time. It's just how stuff works. So they're more prone to that sort of thing. But you can tell pretty easily, I think, on the outside of skates if there is a problem with something. If it's still very stiff everywhere, and you have slices in odd spots that are away from like laces and things like that, you can probably live with a lot of that kind of stuff. You can try and glue stuff like that back together, but it can also, that if you start gluing up parts of your skate boot, it will cover up if you have cuts and slices and holes and things like that. But what it's also going to do is it's going to make it not flex and mold the way that it should to your foot. So depending on where that's at, if it's in a like along the bottom of the boot or something like that, or on an edge, and you're trying to just get it to stop coming apart or something like that, that's very different than something that's in your middle of your boot that normally bends to go around your foot, because it's probably not going to bend properly, which could make the skates a little less uncomfortable. And honestly, skates are one of those things, when they are a little bit off, they get very uncomfortable. So be aware of that you can fill something like that in with, like a two-part epoxy or a JB Weld or something like that. And that will hold it, but it might make the skates really crap to play in. Other thing is the eyelets. Eyelets are a big thing on skates when eyelets start to pull out. So eyelets, I also mean some of the other skate lacing systems that they have that are not necessarily eyelets. Some skates have kind of like those plastic, almost like little hooks that are on the top of the skates for the laces. Any of those kind of things, when they start to come out from your skates, and that can be one, especially if you have them baked, you have to be careful. That's what they always say is when you bake them, you tie them around, to get a good impression of your foot. You pull the laces straight out and not forward. And that's why a lot of places also now are not using laces. They are wrapping the skate in saran wrap very tightly to eliminate this problem. Because when you bake the skates like that, you can really weaken the very thin strip of material that is on the outside of the eyelet. And once that starts to get weakened, and as your skate, as you're tightening them up, when you're tightening your laces down, you can pop those eyelets out. Now you can get new eyelets put in. It's a very simple thing. It's something you can totally do yourself if you want to go buy a little kit from like a craft store or even like a Walmart or something like that. You can find them. They just kind of pound them in. But again, any good pro shop will do this, and they will do it for very, very cheap. If it is just an eyelet has come out. Now, if it's come out because you've blown out or ripped the material that is in front of the eyelet there, then you're going to have to do like some sort of repair to get that to stay in there. Usually that's done by gluing in some sort of fabric or leather around that to reinforce it, and then putting the eyelet in to kind of help clamp that together. And again, that's something you could do yourself, but you have to be really careful with the type of glue that you're using. You want something super, super strong. That does not mean like a super glue or a CA glue or something like that. That's where you're going to want something like a shoe glue or something along those lines to really hold that in there, and have that little piece of, like I said, usually leather, that's on there that's going to kind of hold that all together. And then you rivet the eyelet to kind of compress that and hold that some more, and it'll hold. Sometimes those things hold kind of forever. Sometimes those things don't hold very long at all. It really just kind of depends on how much meat there's kind of left around there and how you wear your skates. If you're someone that wears your skates tied very tightly, that's not going to hold as long as somebody that wears them very loose. So it also depends kind of what eyelet it is that has that problem. A lot of times you see that with the top couple eyelets, because that's also where people flex a lot when they skate. So it's putting a lot of repeated hard stress, no stress, hard stress, no stress as you're skating with that. And that just wears out over time and stretches that little area out. And then you can pop an eyelet. So just be aware. Again, if it's one of those things that's happening a lot, I mean, you might want to, get it repaired for your skates, or maybe look at changing how you lace your skates up a little bit. There's a lot of different techniques out there for how to lace your skates. Maybe something like that would work for you better. Hold your skate on just as good, but not cause those problems. All right, staying on for parts of the skates. Um, Kind of a generic one around the skate. Where you have different layers that get laminated together a little bit. Uh, those can kind of start to come apart at some of the seams. Generally, that's not too big of a deal to have that. Usually, that's kind of more of a cosmetic thing. If it's just at the very edges like that, so that's something you can, just glue up yourself and use some kind of a heavy duty glue. If it's not something that's holding in an eyelet or something else like that, and it's just around an edge, that is where you could use something more along the lines of like a CA or super glue or something to kind of hold that in. Glue it up and clamp it together for a little bit and hold that together, and that should work. Again, stronger glue, something like a shoe goo or something like that, would do a better job, but that's kind of not a necessarily a very integral part of your skate. It's more just preventing it from getting worse, kind of thing. So you can do that. Other parts of your skates that you might or might not be able to repair yourself is your tongue. Some people's tongues just get messed up, just get broken. Um, some newer skates, some fancier high-end skates have removable tongues. So if you have something like that, that's totally something you can do yourself. Some of them just have Velcro or snaps to get them out and replace them. So that's a totally DIY friendly thing. Just got to buy a new tongue and put it in. If you don't have that, you can always sew in a new tongue. That is something that you can probably do yourself if you have either it's called a speedy stitch, which is kind of like a heavy duty stitcher that you do by hand, or if you have a heavy duty sewing machine, something that can do leather. It has to be able to at least do leather because that's usually the more heavy duty ones. It's not just like your regular sewing machine that you have around that you can hem up your pants with or something like that. You need something that's a little bit more heavy duty to be able to go through the thicker materials that are used on hockey equipment. One of the popular things you see online for these is you will see people that have these very kind of old school sewing machines that are like hand crank that are made to do leather work. I have one of those. You can find them for pretty cheap online. You can find brand new ones for like $100 online, and they are kind of a monstrosity to use and a little bit scary. People hook up motors to them, and that makes them very scary. Uh, but they are made for doing like stitching together leather wallets. So they go through 4, 5, 6 layers of kind of thick leather, so they can go through the materials used for hockey equipment pretty easily. So a tongue, if the tongue completely comes detached, there's going to be some spot where you can probably sew it back together, as long as it's like fabric to fabric and not something that's attached, under the plastic toe cap, because you can't really sew through plastic. Just doesn't work real well. Speaking of the toe cap, people's toe caps get cracked, they get blown out, things like that. If you have a toe cap that is just covering kind of the part of your skate, some of them are a whatever material underneath it. So something else that's not plastic, and then kind of a plastic toe cap on top of that. And if the plastic just cracks or splits or a part of it comes off, your skates should be fine, but they will be much less protective of your toes if you get hit. And if there is anything, and I will probably repeat this many times throughout this episode as I go through gear, the cardinal rule is the puck always finds the worst spot to hit you. So if you just have a small piece of your toe cap missing, that's where the puck's going to hit you. I guarantee that's where the puck's going to hit you. It's going to find it. So you could chance it with that missing there. I would try and repair it. If you don't want to buy new skates right away for that, something like that, you can, hopefully if a chunk came off, you can glue it back on. If it's not an integrated, if it's a more integrated toe cap like that and not something that is just covering a piece of material, that's starting to get the integrity of your skate not so great. But again, you can glue something like that back together, but it's going to be hard to put that back together because you kind of have to hold it from inside your skate and outside your skate. You have to really hold it in place while whatever you're using dries. And that's where something like a two-part epoxy or something would hold it in, but it's probably not going to hold it in great while it dries. So that's the sort of thing that unless you get it perfect, you're going to feel it while you skate, which is not great for something there. So that's really a time where you probably need to look at getting new skates, unfortunately. All right, last couple things we're talking about with skates and skate repairing. Tendon guards. Again, some of the newer, fancier skates, much like the tongues, have removable and replaceable tendon guards. If you want to have different flexes, different protection levels, things like that. If you have one of those skates, great. Something happens with the tendon guard, you get a new one, you pop it in, and you're good to go. If you have not super fancy skates like that or older skates, these tendon guards, they will tend to wear out and flex. Usually there is a small flex point somewhere on them because of how they are shaped kind of triangularly. And those will start to crack over time just through wear and tear. And unfortunately, there's not a ton you can do with those. You can try and reinforce the plastic bit a little bit with, again, some sort of a glue or epoxy or something that to help out. But what you are doing then is you are going to make it stiffer, and it'll probably be not as comfortable to skate on because it will be stiffer, or because it starts flexing, you are going to wear that new stuff out pretty quickly because it's not made to flex. So you need to have something that will be flexible enough to hold it together without breaking, but strong enough that it doesn't snap when you're doing that. So that can be a really tough thing there, but that is a common place for those to have that. Now, some skates do have replaceable tendon guards, but they don't seem like they're replaceable. So there are skates that will have like screws or some sort of fastener around them that you can actually take the tendon guard off if it does crack. So even if it's not a modern skate that has easily replaceable tendon guards, that's something you can look at if that does start to wear out. All right. I think that covers skates pretty well and the different things you can and can't do and things you should and shouldn't do yourself. All right. Moving up to the next piece of equipment, you've got shin guards. Now, shin guards, there are a couple of things you can do very easily to make these last longer and help out if something goes wrong with them. They're also a little bit less, how do I put it? The shin guards are really just for protection. So if you feel comfortable with it, you can do more repairs yourself and it's not going to really mess you up unless you get hit. Whereas skates, if you do something, trying to do a repair that is not great, you will fall a whole bunch and not be able to skate good. And that means you kind of can't play. Shin guards are more of you're just kind of taking your own safety in your own hands with that sort of thing, not impeding your ability to play. You might be if you get hurt because you repaired them poorly, though. So keep that in mind. So common things with shin guards. Generally, the front of every shin guard is plastic. These get scraped up. They get beat up pretty bad. That's what they are there for. I mean, it's sacrificial plastic, so that's not your leg taking that, not your shins for it. Knee cups can get beat up pretty bad. I used to have my knee cups used to just shatter. I used to go through a pair of shin guards almost every year because I was someone that tried to block shots like crazy, and I would be dropping down onto my shins a whole bunch to do that. So I would have these things would just get cracked and blown out pretty quickly. Um, Not a great way to repair these and keep them the way they are. There is, if you get little cracks and stuff, you can go through and do things. Uh, you can tape it over. That doesn't really fix anything. I used to get big flaps of plastic on the knee sections that would come undone, and I would tape it down. Uh, just knowing, just so I had plastic there still instead of ripping it off or having it kind of flip up on me while I'm putting my socks on and stuff like that. So that's a way you can do that, and it does help with that. If there is enough kind of meat around it, you can try, like epoxying and something like that, and that will help. Again, going to lose some integrity of the plastic with doing things like that. Not because epoxy isn't strong, though epoxy is probably stronger than plastic, but just because it's the shape is going to be different for it. But unlike with your skates, that kind of matters a little bit less with your shin guards, because it means something is there to hopefully help stop the puck and having it hurt your leg when you get hit. So that's what you can do with the plastic. Now, if you have the plastic start to come undone from kind of the soft goods that is around it and holding that in, usually you'll see that it's kind of sewn in there. This is where you can use, like I talked about, that speedy stitch or an awl. You can try it with a regular needle and thread, but good luck because they are not made to go through things like this. But if you get something that's made for like denim, it might possibly work depending on how thick stuff on your shin guards is. But also that large manual sewing machine or something like that would definitely work and will go through this kind of plastic that is on there. And you can re-stitch them back together if they start to come apart from each other. So that is something I see happen is, this is not the strongest thread that's used here. And I mean, a skate can cut it. It gets hit just right by a puck or even a stick, or you're sliding and it catches something, or it just gets old. That happens. And once that kind of starts to go in one spot, it's going to unravel pretty quickly. So this is a good thing to check on your shin guards every so often and make sure that string is still in good shape around there. And if you see a split, see if you can tie off both ends of it to stop it from doing that. Because if just a little section comes undone, not a big deal. But you can tie off, kind of both sides, make sure it's both sides of it so it stays in place. And you just have a little section that is not stuck together, which that's fine. But you can, like I said, you can sew it back together if you really want to. Now, if you go onto the backside and you're looking at more of the soft goods area for your shin guards, kind of the issues you can have in there depends on what's in there. If it is just the kind of soft, little bit of foamy cushion that is in there that can get worn out, and that foam stuff, you can replace that with other foams from other pieces of equipment. It's kind of similar to what you'd have in other shin guards. Or if you want to beef it up, this is a place where you can actually add more protection. You can add thicker foams from other hockey equipment, or go out and buy foam for that. That is a hard foam, or something like CCM uses that D30 foam. You can actually buy sections of that and sew that into any of your equipment to add some more protection. Uh, a good place to find things like that is for motorcycles. A lot of motorcycle riders will buy like extra foam pads to sew into their jackets and their pants and things like that to add more protection, or add protection to non-motorcycle specific clothing like that. So they have that. So that's something you can find pretty easily online for places, sections of foam like that. I would really, if you're adding foam and you're not going to go buy like a donor set of hockey pads to get that from, so it's a similar size and shape, similar-ish, to either replace or upgrade the foam that you have there, is I would look at that D30 foam. That stuff is, the point of it is it's very soft until it gets impacted, then it becomes harder. So it's really supposed to help spread that impact out. And that's why CCM has been using that in a lot of their higher end stuff. And it's not hard to purchase. So if you have foam that's coming out from any of the like insides of your shin guards, you can easily just slip new foam in there from any of those sources and sew that back up. It's not that hard. You can either sew that. That's something you can do by hand. That's something you can do on a cheap sewing machine. That is something that you can, If you really want to, just tape it up with some kind of tape that's going to not leave a huge disgusting residue on your legs, hopefully, and on yourself. But something also that's a little bit waterproof would be helpful. Honestly, hockey tape is not great for that. It's okay in a pinch, but not great um, to do that. Or you can also buy for something like that. If you have like a split and you're adding in more foam, you can buy glue that is made to seal fabric. It's like no-sew glue. You can buy something like that and use that to seal up whatever cut or rip that you've made in there or gotten in there. That you've either replaced foam or added foam or whatever, or you just have a rip or a tear in there to put that in there. You can buy that stuff, and that saves you the having to sew anything if you don't want to do it. But honestly, doing something like that and sewing by hand is actually extremely easy to do. Another part there is a lot of times nicer shin guards in your knees have kind of like a gel insert right where your knee goes, and those can be a little tricky to replace. Again, if there's different types of ones. Some of them are encased, kind of like a jelly insert that's encased in plastic. Some of them are kind of more hard gel inserts that are just sewn directly in there. And this is a case if some of that goes, you probably do want to get like a donor set of pads and either cut that stuff out of or extract it out of there however you can and replace it directly on your shin guards. There's not a good way to really fix some of that stuff if it comes out and if it's in there pretty bad. I have on my shin guards had kind of they're in two pieces. There is an insert in them that comes out with Velcro, and the front of that insert, so it's kind of sandwiched between my knee sits in the little knee cup, and there is a little bit of padding, and then there is on the outside of that insert is kind of the gel padding that is there that is really supposed to help with the impact, but that's sitting in plastic that has gotten brittle over time and has broken. And then on the outside of that, that connects to the back end of the plastic kneecap. So what I've done is that has come out. That plastic that's gotten brittle in there has cracked. The little gel inserts have come out in pieces, and usually they're still in there. And I find them when I'm taking my gear off because they're not flying out or anything when I play. And that's a place where pretty easy to put that back in, and that's a place where something like uh, a good quality tape. I've used like Gorilla Tape is one that I've used, or something like that. Can keep it there and hold it there. Again, I recommend the stuff that's waterproof for that. But remember, it is kind of holding on to fabric. So make sure you get the tape as much as you can onto the plastic parts to hold everything together and hold those gel things in. And that usually works pretty good. That's what I found is a good way to do that. If you want to be very thorough, you could get a pretty thin, something stretchy fabric and sew a cover onto there to hold that stuff in. That would be a great solution for it. If you want to sew, again, that is something because it's going to be thinner. You could sew by hand very easily. Sew with that speedy stitch that I've talked about, or any kind of sewing machine would do that. But for you, sewing machine, and for all these things, I will say if you're using a sewing machine, make sure you get correct thread for it. You want very strong thread. I'll see people talking about using dental floss instead of thread because dental floss is pretty strong stuff. So for something like that, you could totally just go get a regular needle and some dental thread and sew a little piece of fabric to hold in kind of that gel knee area there if you needed to. And that would totally work and probably last a very long time. Last thing I will talk about on shin guards, and this is applicable to basically all the rest of the gear as well. And this is I think the most common thing you see with hockey equipment as it gets older is the Velcro straps. That's always kind of elasticy straps that have Velcro, and that's how this stuff holds on. And the Velcro wears out over time, which you can revive Velcro with a very stiff toothbrush. Just kind of brush through both sides of it, and that will revive it because Velcro is its hook and loop. I think that's the technical name for it. Velcro's a brand name. It is hook and loop fastener, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a bunch of little loops and a bunch of little things that look like fish hooks, and they hook together. And what happens over time is they get flattened out, so they don't hook together as well. So if you get a very stiff toothbrush and just kind of brush up all those things on both sides of that. That will help revive your Velcro. That's a handy little life tip that you're getting here on the Beer Leaguer podcast. Not just applicable to hockey equipment, applicable to anything that uses Velcro or hook and loop fastener. So that's how you can fix that. But then the other thing is the elastic stretches out. That happens on everything. The elastic stretches out over time. And especially if you're somebody that likes a very tight fit, that can suck. So a couple things you can do. You can completely cut it out and sew in replacement elastic. You can find this kind of elastic that is on these things, same kind of stretchiness, same kind of width and all that. You can find that pretty easily at any like fabric or sewing store or anything like that. You can find it online pretty easily. And that is one solution you can totally do. And that is probably the best solution if you want to have your stuff be still very tight. So you can like really kind of ratchet it down because you need that elasticity so that it can hold in there and, still move a little bit with you as you move. So that is kind of like the primo way to do it. Cut that stuff off, put on all new elastic and all new Velcro, and that takes care of it. But if you don't want to do that because that's kind of a pain to sew that stuff in, then the other option that you have is you can actually just kind of take some of the, if there is still some stretch left in the elastic, you can take some of that, kind of fold it over onto itself. And you can do this, put the stuff on, see how much you need to have left on there to hold it and fold it onto itself. And you can either you could put a safety pin in there and that would hold it. Not the best way because you probably don't really want a safety pin sitting down there in your gear like that. Not ideal because if it comes undone, poking yourself with it. Also not going to be the most permanent solution. So you can totally do that with a safety pin. You can also just sew that together. That's just a little bit of sewing in there. You're gonna want that to be kind of strong though, if you're going to sew it, because it will be getting tugged on. So you're not going to do, a couple little, can't think of the right word for that you do when you sew. You don't want to do just a couple of those stitches. You want to do a lot of them to do that. That's why I usually see a lot of stuff with like an X that they make with the stitches to have it hold a little bit more. So you could totally do that. Or if you want to go a no-sew route, this is again where you can use some of that no-sew glue and do that. And just kind of fold it over onto itself and glue it. Make sure you kind of clamp it together, put it between some books, something like that, and hold it for as long as you can. Usually that type of glue will tell you how long it needs to set for. It's going to be a couple of hours. So not something to do before, like right before you go out for a game. But if you notice after a game that you need to have that, something you could totally do in the couple of days between games that you have. And, all that's going to do is shorten the length of that elastic that you have on there. And that will definitely hold your shin guards on better. And again, this works for kind of universally for all of your equipment and the elastic Velcro straps to hold it on. That will help hold that on a little bit better, but it's not going to be quite the same because the elasticity is going to be worn out. So it's not going to probably move as much as you would necessarily like it to. But that's the way you can try it. If you just want to see if that's going to work, you can try just taking, like I said, safety pin or a couple of pins or something like that, shortening it up, kind of like overlap it onto itself, and put the shin pads on and walk around, see if they fit good. If they do, and it's not bothering you, it's not too tight, then that's an easy way to go. Just glue that up. Another thing you can do, what I do, because the elastic on my shin guards is not great. These are old shin guards. I actually have little elastic sleeves that I put over my shin guards to hold them in. They have little elastic sleeves you can buy that are like that. They also have elastic straps that are made to just go around your shin guards. They can go inside or outside of your hockey socks. Doesn't really matter if you do the outside. It also, holds your hockey socks on pretty tight with that. And those are two ways you can completely skip around having to replace that elastic, but still keep your shin guards, holding on pretty well and holding on good like that for you. And those are things you can buy. Any well-stocked hockey store will have those. You can buy them online very, very easily. Either one of those works. All right, continuing to move on up the body with your hockey equipment. Next up is pants. So what can break on your pants? What can go wrong with your pants? What can you easily repair? And when do you have to get new ones? I have seen people with just completely destroyed hockey pants, the ones that barely stay on. Again, hockey pants, much like shin guards, if you don't feel like you need a lot of protection there, you can wear some pretty horrible ones that are not really going to help you out. You can totally get away with that. Um, they're not really going to hinder your play if your hockey pants are bad. They will hinder the protection that they offer you. That's really about it. So that's kind of taking it into your own hands, whatever you do with them. They have those zippers. Most of them have them at this point. The Gretzky zippers, whatever you want to call them. So you can be a weirdo and put your skates on first, and then put your pants on second. If those break, they break. I mean, you can put new zippers on. You can sew them in. If you don't use them, I never use them because I'm not a weirdo. I put my pants on first, then I put my skates on. If mine were to completely just stop working, I would just sew that whole area shut on the pants and just not have a zipper there. That's a super easy thing you can sew. You can sew it yourself, like any of the ways we talked about. It is not a super critical thing. You just would want to make sure you're using a very strong thread and a strong stitch, and probably go a couple times up and down the whole length of it so it doesn't come undone. But that would be a very easy thing to do for that. You could also sew in a zipper if you were so inclined and needed to have new ones. But sewing in zippers is kind of a tricky thing to do. So I don't know if you want to do that, but that is a thing you can do as well. Have that done, and that would completely eliminate that as a problem. Other thing you can have with your pants is, a lot of the hockey pants have like a belt or lace system. Most of them are just using skate laces for the lacing. That's easy to replace yourself. That's super easy if that goes. Just get an old skate lace or buy a new skate lace if you want to get a new one or with a fun color or something like that, and replace it with that. Same thing. The belt system is usually just like a webbing material that is very easy to find and replace. You can buy that webbing material at any kind of craft store, online, something like that. Very, very easy to replace that and buy new plastic, either a D rings that will hold it together like a belt, or the little snap connectors or whatever you have, or replace, if you don't like the one that's there, with something that's more convenient. And there are no sew only, or various configurations of those you can get as well to fix that to whatever suits how much repair you want to put into it. But if some of those things go and you don't want to replace those, or you don't think those are doing the best thing, you can do it. I do. I don't like using any of those systems. I just have suspenders. I love having my hockey pants on suspenders. I think it is way more comfortable and way nicer. And that's why if something like that breaks, just go buy hockey suspenders. I have yet to see a pair of hockey pants, and I'm sure there are ones out there though, that don't have the little buttons for holding suspenders in. I think they all do have them there for it. So if you're wondering what those little buttons are on your hockey pants because you've never used them before, they are for hockey suspenders. So I love hockey suspenders, and that completely eliminates the need to having to replace any of that stuff. Now, if you do use hockey suspenders, depending on the brand of hockey pants you have, those little buttons that hold the suspenders on are sometimes not great. And those, they don't usually break because they're metal, but what'll happen is they will pop through the fabric. Sometimes they're not in there great, but those are very easy to replace with a complete no-sew solution. I have done videos on these before, and what you can get is if you can get something to replace like denim buttons, like buttons you'd have for jeans. Those are like the easiest things to find, and those are just come in a little kit that you usually buy, and you just kind of hammer them or press them together, and they will put that little button on there, and you can use it. And those work pretty well. Or you can also get what's called a Chicago screw. That's very similar to what you have on your helmets. That is, it's a little screw, and these would have a flat a large flat area on one side for them because they are like a button. And then the back side of what it's screwing into is going to be a metal post that has kind of a large round area behind it, and you screw into that. And some of those usually hold better. That's what I have done with my pants because those have started to break and pop through the fabric on mine. So I've replaced all of those with these Chicago screws. And I do recommend, if you are going to do that on the Chicago screws, use some Loctite. That does seem to help. What I've seen, I've also I've tried putting in a little bit of super glue, just a dab on the threads, hold that in. That also helps a little bit because those aren't made for necessarily the rigors that hockey suspenders kind of go through as they bounce around while you're playing. So a little Loctite or a little bit of super glue or something like that does definitely help. But that's a easy, no slow solution to doing that. I have a video all about that. I will link that in the notes for this episode. Which, by the way, if you want links to a bunch of the stuff that I've talked about in this, products or other videos or things like that, they will be in the show notes for this that you can get always over at thebeerleaguer.com. That's the best place to go to get notes for any of these episodes and kind of see all the stuff that I'm talking about with it. Now, also with pants, other things you can have very similar to Shin Guards is you can get cuts in kind of the fabricy parts and have exposed padding, have padding fall out, or realize you need more padding in pants. The different brands and different levels of the hockey pants will have different amounts of padding in different areas. And maybe it's not quite, you want more padding in a certain area, less padding in another area, something like that. This is a lot of these pro stock pants. This is what they do is they will just kind of cut open. Pro stock ones usually do a much nicer job and will cut open on a seam and resew it. That's the really nice way to do it. Cut open a seam, pull out padding, put more padding in, resew that seam up, and have some nicer padding in there. Or you can also cut open an area and put more padding in if you want some more padding into something, and sew it back up, glue it back up, the various methods that we have talked about previously to do that. For me personally, with my pants, I got ones that had the padding that I liked, but I actually noticed I didn't have any tailbone padding. And last year I fell directly on my tailbone and it hurt for about 2 weeks. And so what I did is I cut open the inside of my pants right in that tailbone area because there was like no padding there, but there was, fabric covering everything. I just cut it open. I bought some the D3O foam that I talked about in somewhat of an appropriate size there. I kind of cut it a little bit to fit really nicely, popped that in there, and I sewed it back shut, and I had some nice tailbone padding in my pants now. It's a very easy thing to do, takes a couple minutes, but that's a way you can enhance your pads, get them a little bit more customized to what you want, or if something happens and foam comes out, or it's just wearing away or getting dead, it's pretty easy to repair that way. Now, if you have pants that you need to just kind of repair the outside of, or you really don't want to sew stuff in there, or maybe there's chunks missing from the outside of your pants, what do you do? Well, you could go get some sort of whatever kind of material you want, something that's going to be a little bit heavy duty. Again, something waterproof, and sew it onto the pants, sew a patch onto there. That's totally something you can do. Or another solution is you can get like patches that are made to stick onto stuff so you don't actually have to sew it. And if you're going to do that route, I would recommend getting Gore-Tex. Gore-Tex patches, they are pretty easy to find online. They come in various sizes. You can cut them to shape, whatever you need. And they're made to stick to fabric because they're made to stick to other Gore-Tex things. And because of that, they're going to stick to something like pants really well. They are going to, usually hold up better for the wetness and stuff that you get from hockey. So you don't have to worry as much about that. But if you are going to do that, I will recommend another thing, that if you do have a chunk of fabric missing, that you don't necessarily just get like a stick-on patch and put it on there to cover the whole thing up, because that will stick to the padding underneath and then the kind of fabric that is around that will not hold on as well. So get some other piece of fabric kind of in there, and cut the patch kind of big and put it over the area, and also with that piece of fabric behind it to hold it all in there. Um, because if you just put the patch on, you have a big hole missing on the front of your pants. Then as you're moving and stuff, and that fabric's made to kind of twist and move, and it's not permanently attached all the way around to the padding in your pants. But if you stick it to it, it will get permanently attached in there, and that could either eventually wear out the backing on your patch, which then could cause a problem, or it could start ripping on the padding that's underneath, and you don't want that either. So just use a patch that's a decent amount larger than the hole that you have, and have kind of a sacrificial piece of any kind of fabric, honestly, underneath it. It could really be anything that you have lying around, or again, when you buy these, buy some cheapo fabric that you put underneath there and have it in there, and that will save that. And that's how you can repair outside of your pants. That's also a way, if you are someone that uses shells and a girdle, that's how you can repair some of the girdle parts on there. The shell parts, you shouldn't need to get patches like that and be um, that careful with it of those. You can be, though. That is a way you can repair the shells. The shells are usually a little bit easier, especially because they come off and there's nothing behind them. So it's a lot easier if you do want to sew something into there, which is always the best way to make that connection in there, versus just using a glue or a sticky backing or something like that to sew it, and just sew like a regular patch into it of whatever type of material. But you could use those patches on a shell as well to handle that. Okay, now moving up to the next piece of equipment you have is going to be your chest protector. Uh, Again, you're going to see all these things kind of stack on to the same ideas that we've talked about. Your chest protector is going to be very similar to the other stuff you have. There's usually no like kind of fabric that's out there. It's usually just something that's covering the padding that's on there, and so there's that. So it's the same techniques we've talked about for uh, the girdle we talked about, or some of the same things we talked about for your shin guards, how to replace that stuff or repair that stuff if it's there, or how to add some more to it. But what the kind of wrinkle you get with your shoulder pads, also you will have the Velcro and elastic usually to hold that stuff on. Talked about how to repair that, how to fix that. If you need to replace it or update it a little bit, make it hold on to you a little bit better, is you will have usually like shoulder caps that are going to be held on with just some sort of material sewn into somewhere on the shoulder pads. It's usually just like a webbing material, like you would have for handles, probably of your hockey bag or something like that. And that's just sewn on and keeping the hard plastic shoulder caps. And if you have like a little uh, piece that goes underneath the cap and is kind of like the upper arm protector, that's usually all on one kind of piece of webbing that's then sewn into something like right above the shoulder. That's where you will see beer leaguers kind of cut that thing off if they don't want to have shoulder protection on that. So that is a route you can go to completely eliminate that whatsoever. But if you need to repair that, if you need to repair that webbing, again, that's webbing you can buy. Any fabric store will have that. You can buy it online very easily. It's usually really cheap to buy that stuff, but that is something that is kind of difficult to sew. That's not something you're really going to be able to sew unnecessarily with just a needle and thread or a regular sewing machine, because the webbing itself is kind of thick, but then also whatever you're going to sew it into is probably going to be very thick stuff. It might even be plastic, depending on how your shoulder pads are put together. So that is where something like that Speedy Stitcher really works out. That is something I've had to do. I had the whole like shoulder cap and upper arm protector came off of my shoulder pads, and I had to sew the whole thing back on. And what I wound up sewing it into was, which is what it originally went into, was a pretty thick seam of fabric right above the shoulder. And I did use the Speedy Stitcher for that. Worked great, and got that in. But that is a way you can repair that. That is also if you want to just take off some of that shoulder protection, or if you want to, now you're getting into kind of like customizing your stuff, cut that off and put on a different shoulder cap from another pair of pads. That's how you do it. This is what the equipment guys do. It's a lot of cutting stuff off from one version of something and sewing it into the new version. So if you kind of get the skills to do this by fixing a couple things, you can very easily start to customize your gear. It is a very small leap to getting into that. Uh, and it's easy to do. Like I said, if you don't want to get into a whole like machine setup, you can buy some of these things. I keep saying like the Speedy Stitcher, but any of these things that are kind of like the more heavy duty things for using on like denim and leather and stuff like that. They're very, very cheap to purchase. It's completely manual, but it's not hard to do. Once you get the hang of it, it's pretty simple to use those. And you can use that on all of your gear to fix and repair things or start to customize stuff. You can say, hey, I wish my shoulder pads were a little bit, shaped differently. I wish they were longer. I wish they had a different type of plastic or something like that. Instead of trying to mess around with the ones you have, you could go to, a used sporting goods store, find ones that you like, buy those shoulder pads, cut them off, sew them onto your pads. That's a very easy way to do it with that. But generally, I think that's it with shoulder pads. They are pretty similar to other stuff that we've talked about. So there's not a whole lot of specific things for them and how to repair them and stuff. I know there's a lot of beer leaguers out there that don't even wear shoulder pads. So maybe you don't even care. But I think that they are great for if you fall. I feel like they help you out or somebody knocks into you, especially if you're playing at a lower level of a beer league where not everyone skates all that great. So I would keep that in mind if you're deciding whether or not to wear some, or if you're going to get ones that you are going to cut off the shoulder caps and stuff like that. It's the way I always think of it is it's not how good you are, it's how good everybody you are playing against is. That's what you have to worry about and be concerned with. So that's how I always think of any of this for any of my gear, is not necessarily, how I think for how I play. It's I'm thinking about all the people that I play against and the different levels that they are and things that they can do unintentionally that I want to make sure my gear is in good shape for. And again, you can add more foam into places, take foam out of places, adjust the foam that's in there, change it out for whatever you want. If you want more or less foam or more or less bulk or protection in certain areas of shoulder pads pretty easily, just like you can with the pants and the shin guards. Not that big of a deal. All right, on to elbow pads. Elbow pads, stuff we've all talked about already. They are the simplest usually of pads that you have for things because they're usually just a chunk of plastic and foam on one side, and then different places for strapping things on to hold them into place for you. Elbow pads, notoriously, I think for everyone, kind of universally, is the piece of equipment that shifts around and does not hold on the best of anything. So, adjusting those Velcro straps and those elastic straps that are on there might be great. Maybe you want to shorten those up even for ones that are still very stretchy. You want to shorten them up so you get a better kind of hold on them to keep them in place for stuff like that. You even add more of those. You could buy some of that elastic webbing, buy some Velcro, sew it together or glue that part together and sew it and attach it onto different parts of your elbow pads if you wanted to have different points of attachment. So they stay on a little bit better and don't fall down or don't ride up or whatever they're doing for you. You can always add more to something like that. I suppose you could add more foam, more protection, more plastic bits if you really wanted to onto elbow pads. But usually there's not much to them. So I don't know how useful that would be or how practical that is, honestly, because usually there's not a lot of meat on there to have any place to kind of do that level of customization for them. Okay, the next one, and I think the thing that people probably think of the most for repairing their gear, your gloves. How can you fix them? What can you fix? What's worth fixing? When's it time to just get new gloves on there? Well, there's not a ton of stuff that you can repair with your gloves. There's a couple things you can. Now, if you have like kind of the outside fabric, much like we said in anything else, you can get some tape and tape that up with some heavy duty tape, and that'll kind of work. But what winds up happening with a lot of those types of things, if you do that for like kind of the outer fabric, is your gloves stretch as they do it. That's why it's fabric on there, because it has to have a little bit of stretch to it. So if you use some kind of a tape or repair like that on the outsides of your gloves, it might make it hard to, close your hand. So just be prepared. If you're going to do something like that, I'd recommend kind of having your hand closed in the glove when you put that on there. And then, kind of really, smooth it out, get it on to stick, and then take your hand out of your glove and have it go to the open position. And hopefully it still stays there. To at least have it so that way it doesn't pop off right away when you go to grab your stick. If it's just kind of stuff on the outside for like the fingers and things like that, if there's like cuts and scrapes, I mean, that happens on gloves. Where it starts to get a problem if they start to get big and the foam that's in there starts to come out. I have seen that a number of times with people, and you can just let it happen and let the foam come out and have your gloves not protect you if that's what you really want. Or that is something, if it's just like the edge of the foam, like on the edge of the fingers and stuff like that, you can tape that pretty easily up and keep that foam in there with no big deal. It's pretty easy to repair. Gloves are a lot harder to easily add protection to. What they do on the pro stock gloves, if they add protection, like add the shot blocker protection, is they will get some kind of a harder foam, whatever foam they're going to use, kind of wrap it in this similar type of material that's on the glove, and then they will sew it into usually the back of the hand, like the top of the hand there, and have that be a shot blocking protection. And that is something that you could do on your own, but it's going to be tough to kind of get stuff that matches if you care about that. It's also going to be tough to sew into these because it's hard to get into the glove very well like that. So it's going to be a lot harder for you to try and do something like that on your own versus taking it to someone that's got like the equipment for those types of things. So something like that speedy stitcher that I talked about will probably do that. And so I know at least like on my gloves, there's usually like a couple different flaps of protection inside. And so you don't want to make sure you kind of pull those out of the way, kind of almost make your gloves as inside out as possible if you're going to try and sew something onto the outside of it. So it doesn't sew those into place for it, because you don't want to have that. So you can try doing that. It's going to be kind of tricky though to do unless you are kind of more experienced with this stuff. Now, the thing that I think most people have happen with their gloves and they worry about is the palm of their gloves. Your palm wears out over time. It's a thing that happens. I have definitely noticed that if you use some of the non like hockey tape uh, ends for your stick for doing your the butt end of your stick, so something like a butt ends or a lizard skin or any of those do seem to wear down the palms of your gloves a lot less from what I've seen. So if that's something you care about, that might be a way you might want to go. Like that will help the longevity of your gloves out for sure. The other thing you can do with the palms, you can always send them out to get repaired. There's lots of services online that will repair your hockey gear like that, especially completely do a whole new palm for your gloves. And you can get like real nice fancy ones and really upgraded palms for them. They can be kind of pricey to do that though. So just be aware that's something that can be pretty pricey to have done. But if you got a pair of gloves that you love and you want to get that done, that's the thing you can do. Another thing, if you're just have a couple rips or tears in there, you can buy some of those Gore-Tex patches that I talked about and, just kind of stick those on. You can just stick them on and just leave them. You can stick them on and reinforce it with some stitching around it, and that will cover up rips and tears in the palm so they don't get worse to help them last longer. If you are handy with sewing, one thing that I have seen people do a number of times is if the palms of the glove are just kind of toast and there's huge gashes, huge chunks missing, the kind where you can see the palm of somebody's hand because there's no glove there, is what you do is you cut out the entire palm almost. You leave you leave it a lip of the material around the edge there, and then go get a pair of like nice leather gloves or something similar to that, cut the palm out of those, and then sew those into the hockey glove. Something I've seen people do. Again, because of how the gloves are and getting into the fingers and everything, I don't think you're going to get a machine to do that. So it's something you would have to be comfortable with doing by hand. And it would take a while. It'd be a tedious thing to do. But again, if you have a pair of gloves that you love, that is a way you could save them and, still have some pretty good level of protection for the palm of your hand there. Then you can do it yourself. All right. Last piece at the top, your helmet. This is more so even than skates, something that I would not really try and repair because to me, helmet is the most important piece of gear that you wear. Because if your helmet is compromised and you hit the ice, your head hits the ice, man, that can cause some bad damage. That can be not great uh, very easily. So that is the thing I would be the most leery about trying to repair on a helmet. I mean, you can't repair some stuff. It's not a big deal to replace like the little J clips. That's what they call the clips on the sides of your helmet that hold your visor or your cage in. That stuff's really easy to repair and replace. Any of the screws in there, very easy to buy a helmet repair kit, which is something that you should probably have in your bag anyways, uh, to to repair any of this stuff that happens. Someone on your team should definitely have one of those because those little bits fall out from helmets from time to time. Those are very easy to replace if they rust out. I will also mention here you should replace your helmet every so often. There is a sticker on it that is the HECC certification sticker, and your helmet does have an expiration date. If you didn't know that, I don't know if any beer leaguers really follow that. Uh, but if your helmet's like super expired by multiple years, you should probably look at getting a new one that is not. It is what that's for is for the life, kind of to talk about the life of the foams and other things that are in there that are supposed to protect you. So after it's expired, they basically are saying it's no longer doing the job it's supposed to be doing. So that's the one piece of equipment where I would be kind of concerned with that sort of thing. If anything, kind of on the outside plastic part of the helmet, the integrity of that is not doing well. If anything cracks or is broken there, just get a new helmet. Don't try and fix it. Just get a new helmet. Um, if the places where you put the screws in, if any of those the little holes that you're trying to put the screws in that hold on your visor or your cage or something like that, you can try and glue in kind of the back end of that screw, like we were talking about. Those Chicago screws that have like the little screw and post. You can try and glue in that post and see if that will let you get the helmet, the screws in there to like hold in uh, your cage or your visor or whatever. You can also just get like a washer, a washer that will fit that little post in there that's a little bit larger, and maybe there's enough helmet plastic around that'll keep that in there to hold that better than just having if it's cracked right around it. That is a solution you could use for something like that. But again, I would say probably just get a new helmet. If anything is cracked or broken or dented on your visor or your cage or fishbowl, whatever you have, don't try and repair it. Just get a new one. It did its job. If something like that happened, it did its job. Get a new one. It saved whatever happened to you. It saved it. Just go get a new one. Not worth it. On the inside of your helmets, you have usually they're foams. Some of the newer ones have like that 3D printed meshy material like that. Sometimes that stuff can come loose from your helmet. You can glue that back in, but you have to be very, very careful with the type of glue that you use. Most glues will just eat up foam. So if it's any foam, if it's that plasticky mesh, I'm not really sure how well that sticks with stuff. But if you're going to try and glue the foam stuff back in, you have to be really careful with the type of glues that you use. Usually you need like some kind of a contact cement or spray contact cement or something like that you spray or spread on the inside of the helmet and on the foam and hold that back in, because otherwise a lot of these adhesives that you would try and use on something like that is just going to eat it up and just destroy it, which completely destroys the usefulness of your helmet. And again, not worth it. But I have seen prematurely some of this stuff will just kind of come loose. And if you want that to stay in place, that is a pretty easy fix. Other stuff on there on the helmets, besides kind of the screws holding everything in, it's very easy to replace the ear loops if you keep them on your helmet. I don't get why people take those off, but they're very easy to replace. They're just screwed in there. The chin strap stuff, you can buy replacement chin straps. You can buy fancier chin straps, heavy duty chin straps, ones that have better kind of snaps than the ones that, normally come on there. No problem. You can buy all cheap versions of this stuff, fancy versions of this stuff, because the cheap versions, which is what every helmet comes with, basically, they're only made to last a couple years. And if, like most beer leaguers, we're keeping our helmets for way longer than we're supposed to, that stuff just rusts out and then doesn't snap and doesn't work like it's supposed to, because it's usually just kind of really crappy pop metal. So you can buy like all plastic versions that will hold, the chin strap on, or that will nicely hold your fishbowl or your cage onto your helmet or something like that. You can buy nicer strapping and stuff like that, made specifically for, the hockey helmet. You could make that stuff yourself. I don't think it's worth it unless you have that stuff, because it's usually very cheap just to buy some of these repair things. A lot of the nicer, a little bit larger selection helmet repair kits will come with like an extra chin strap or something like that. If not, again, super easy to find at, I think any hockey store should stock this stuff very, very, very easily. You can find it online very easily. It's also the kind of thing that you might find in some of those hockey vending machines that some of the rinks have. They might have like a helmet repair kit that's got some of that stuff in there. So you can find it and get it very, very simply to use. And again, I'm going to reiterate one last time. I really wouldn't try and repair your helmet. Anything beyond tightening the screws down or replacing those screw and posts because they are starting to rust out, or you've lost one because they've come out. Anything beyond that, I really wouldn't try and fix on your helmet. Just get a new one. All right, everybody, that covers everything I know of going from skates to helmet, of different ways you can repair your gear, when you should repair your gear, and kind of all my tips and tricks that I know of to let your gear last as long as possible and keep it as long as possible. Because like I said in the beginning, hockey is expensive. It shouldn't be more expensive. Do things to make it cheaper, but not things to make it less safe. Hope this helped a couple of you out there. If there are other gear questions you have and specific things that you're wondering if there's an easy way to repair it or an easy way to kind of work around it, I would love to hear about that. Drop me a message and let me know. How can you drop me a message? There's all kinds of different ways, all of them available at thebeerleaguer.com, which is also where you can go and get show notes, past episodes, find all the different Beer Leaguer accounts that are out there in the social media sphere with all the random stuff that I know you want to find out about what I'm doing in my day-to-day hockey life. So go check that out. Show notes will have links to everything I've talked about, including other episodes, other videos, things that have to do with this, products that I've mentioned throughout this. So that is a good place to get that. Transcripts, if you need to figure out what I'm talking about and you can't understand what I'm saying, that'll be out there as well. All that good stuff at thebeerleaguer.com. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll catch you in the next one.